I found out that my family had sold the beach house. Not their house, ours. The one I paid for over 17 years. I found out because my son-in-law mentioned it at Sunday lunch, laughing, that the buyer was a guy he knew from work. I held my fork in the air. My wife didn't look away. My daughter wiped her mouth with her napkin. And nobody thought it was strange that I didn't know. I wasn't angry. I was invisible. And the worst part is that it wasn't the first time. I just hadn't noticed it. Yet. Let me tell you how I got here. Because you need to understand that this didn't start with the beach house. It started much earlier. Maybe years earlier. And I, like an idiot, thought that being present was enough. I thought that paying the bills, showing up for dinners, driving everyone to the airport at 5 in the morning, holding my wife's hand during her medical exams, I thought that kept me in. I thought that was participation. But true participation isn't just being there. It's being heard. It's being considered. And at some point, without me realizing it, I became decoration. A useful piece of furniture. Always available. Never consulted. That Sunday lunch was in Sacramento, at the house my daughter and her husband bought 2 years ago. A beautiful house. Big backyard. 3 bedrooms. I made the down payment. They never asked. I offered. Because that's what parents do, right? We want to see our children well off. We want to make things easier. So when my daughter said they had found their dream house but that the bank was making things difficult, I didn't think twice. I transferred $25,000. She cried, thanked me, said I was the best dad in the world, and I believed her. But that Sunday, while my son-in-law laughed about the guy who had bought the beach house, while my daughter served more wine to her mother, while my grandson played on the floor without even looking at me, I understood something. Gratitude is not inclusion. They were grateful for what I gave, but they didn't want me at the table where decisions were made. I was the bank, not the board. The beach house was in Monterey, ocean view, 2 small bedrooms, a wooden deck that I renovated myself 3 summers ago. We went there every holiday when my daughter was a child. She learned to ride a bike on that street. My wife read on the porch every morning. I grilled fish and we ate while watching the sunset. It wasn't just a house. It was where we were family. And they sold it. Without telling me. Without asking if I wanted it. Without even having the decency to pretend my opinion mattered. But what really broke me was realizing that nobody found that strange. That night, I drove home in silence. My wife was in the passenger seat, scrolling on her phone. I waited. I waited for her to say something, to explain, to justify herself, anything. But she only commented that her grandson was growing up fast and that we should buy him a better present for his birthday. Next month. As if nothing had happened. As if selling a property that was in my name, which I paid for alone over almost 2 decades, was an administrative detail that didn't deserve discussion. I got home. She went straight to her room. I stayed in the living room, sitting in the dark, just me and the sound of the clock on the wall. And it was there, in that silence, that I started to remember. I started to put the pieces together, and I realized that this wasn't new. I had just been too blind to see it. 3 months ago, my wife changed the family's health insurance plan. I found out when a letter arrived from the new provider. I asked her why she had changed. She said the old one was expensive and that a friend had recommended this one. End of conversation. There was no, what do you think? No, let's see together. She decided. She communicated. And I, as always, swallowed it. 6 months ago, my daughter and her husband decided to enroll my grandson in a private school. $15,000 a year. I found out when she called me asking if I could help with the tuition. They didn't ask if I thought it was worth it. They didn't show me the options. It was already decided. He was already enrolled. I just needed to pay. And I paid. Because that's what I do. A year ago, my wife and daughter planned a trip to Europe. 2 weeks. London, Paris, Rome. I found out when I saw the printed tickets on the kitchen table. I asked when they had decided on this. My wife said they had talked about it several times, and that I never paid attention anyway. I didn't remember any conversation, but I didn't insist either, because questioning would be annoying. It would ruin the moment. So I smiled. I asked if they needed money, and I transferred $3,000. Sitting there in the dark, I saw the pattern. They decided. I paid. They lived. I watched. And somewhere in the middle of that arrangement, I accepted that this was my role. The silent provider. The guy who makes things work, but doesn't need to be in the room when the plans are made. But the beach house was different. Because this time, I couldn't pretend everything was okay. Look, I know you might be listening to this and thinking, why did you let it get to this point? And I understand the question, because I asked myself the same thing that night. But if you've ever been in a situation where giving seemed safer than speaking, you know it's not cowardice, it's exhaustion. It's fear of being the problem. It's believing that love is sacrifice, even when the sacrifice becomes invisibility. If this makes sense to you, subscribe to the channel, because this story isn't over yet, and I need you to stay until the end. Leave a comment too. Tell me where you're watching from now. I want to know I'm not talking to myself. The next morning, I woke up before my wife. I went to the kitchen. I made coffee. I sat at the small table near the window and looked at the backyard. The flowers I planted last year were beautiful. The lawn needed mowing, everything normal, everything in its place. Except me. I couldn't stop thinking. I couldn't switch my mind off. And for the first time in a long time, I asked myself a question I had avoided for years. When did I become optional? It didn't happen all at once. I know that. Nobody wakes up one day and decides, from today on, I'm going to completely ignore what he thinks. It was gradual. It was in the small details. It was in the way. Conversations started happening without me. How plans were made while I was at work. How decisions were finalized before I got home. And when I arrived, everything was already settled. All I could do was agree, or be the annoying person who questions everything. I remember a specific moment. It must have been about 5 years ago. My daughter was finishing college. She wanted to do a master's degree, but she was torn between 2 universities, one in San Francisco near home, the other in Boston. I thought we were going to talk about it, sit down together, weigh the pros and cons. But one Sunday, she simply announced that she had accepted the place in Boston. She had already rented an apartment. She had already packed her bags. I blinked. My wife smiled. She said it was an incredible opportunity, and I agreed, because what else could I do? At the time, I thought it was just her being independent, making her own decisions, becoming an adult. But now I see it differently. She wasn't being independent. She was excluding me. And the worst part? I let her. I validated it. I smiled and said I was proud. When in reality, inside I wanted to ask, why didn't you talk to me before? Why didn't my opinion matter? But I didn't ask. Because parents don't do that, right? Parents support. Parents don't complain. Parents don't make their children's achievements about themselves. So I swallowed it. I swallowed it and pretended everything was fine. And maybe that's where it all started. Maybe it was at that moment that I taught my family that my voice was dispensable. My wife came into the kitchen. She said good morning. She grabbed a cup of coffee. She sat down on the other side of the table. And she stayed there, scrolling through her Instagram feed, as if it were just another day. As if yesterday hadn't happened. I wanted to talk. I wanted to ask about the house. But the words wouldn't come out. Because I knew that if I asked, she would look at me with that, "You're exaggerating again," face, and say that it had been decided months ago, and that she was sure she had told me. And maybe she even believes it. Maybe in her head, she really did tell me. In a passing comment. In a conversation I didn't pay attention to. But the truth is there was no conversation. There was a message. And I'm tired of receiving messages about my own life. The following days were strange, not because anything changed in my routine, but because I changed. I started to notice. I started to pay attention. And the more I looked, the more I saw. It was as if someone had turned on a light in a room I thought I knew, and suddenly, everything was different. Everything was empty. My wife would make plans with her friends and only tell me a day before. She never asked if I had any plans. She never checked if I needed her for anything. She would just inform me. I'm going out Tuesday night. Heat up the food I left in the fridge. And I would heat it up, because it was easier than asking why she didn't include me, why we didn't do anything together anymore. My daughter would call 2 or 3 times a week, but never to talk to me, always to talk to her mother. I'd answer the phone. I'd pass it to my wife. Sometimes she wouldn't even greet me. Sometimes I'd just hear her voice in the background, laughing at something my wife had said, and I'd just sit there, holding the phone, wondering when I'd become the intermediary for my own family. At work, everything remained the same. I was a manager at a logistics company in Sacramento. I had a team of 12 people. I solved problems. I made decisions. People listened to me. They respected me. But at home? At home, I was a ghost. And the worst part was that nobody seemed to notice. One day, I came home from work and saw my wife and daughter in the living room, surrounded by papers, catalogs, and fabric samples. They were planning a renovation at my daughter's house, replacing the kitchen floor, painting the walls. My daughter wanted a light gray. My wife thought beige was more timeless. They argued, they laughed, they compared photos on their phones. I went in, I said hi, they said hi back, and they continued. I sat on the sofa. I stayed there, waiting for someone to ask me what I thought, waiting for someone to show me the options. But nobody did anything. They finished deciding, they closed the catalogs, and my daughter kissed me on the forehead. "Thank you for letting Mommy help me, Dad." And she left. I didn't leave anything out. I didn't even know it was happening. But again, I didn't say anything. Because saying anything would mean admitting that I felt excluded. And men don't say those things. Men don't complain about feeling left out. So I smiled. I said, "Don't worry about it, honey." And I stayed there, alone, while my wife went upstairs to take a shower. That night, lying in bed, I thought about the beach house again. I thought about all the times I was excluded and pretended not to care. And for the first time, I allowed myself to feel anger. Not explosive anger, the kind that makes you shout and slam doors, but a cold, deep anger. The anger of someone who realizes they've been deceived, not by others, but by yourself. Because I convinced myself that being needed was the same as being important. And it's not. You can be indispensable to someone and still be completely invisible. I started testing it. Not on purpose at first, but gradually it became almost an experiment. I wanted to know how far indifference could go, how far I could disappear without anyone noticing. So I stopped offering. I stopped volunteering. I stopped asking, "Do you need anything?" every time someone sighed near me. And I waited. My wife didn't notice. Or if she did, she didn't say anything. She kept going out, making plans, living her life. My daughter kept calling to talk to her mother. My son-in-law kept greeting me with that overly firm handshake, the kind men give when they don't know what to say. And my grandson? My grandson continued to see me as the old man who gave money and bought ice cream. A week after lunch, my daughter called. Late at night. My wife answered. She talked for 20 minutes. She hung up. I asked what it was about. She said my daughter was thinking about changing cars. She wanted something bigger, an SUV. Because with her grandson growing up, the sedan was getting cramped. I waited. I waited for her to say, "And she wants to know what you think," or, "She'll need help with the down payment." But nothing came. My wife just said that and went back to watching TV. I stood there, processing. My daughter was thinking about buying a new car, and it didn't even occur to her to call me, to ask me, to include me. I've always helped with cars. I've always gone with her to dealerships. I've always negotiated prices. But this time I wasn't even in the equation, and my wife thought that was normal. 2 days later, my wife mentioned at breakfast that she had made dinner plans with my daughter and son-in-law on Saturday. That new restaurant that opened near their house. They said it's good. I winked. "Oh, cool. What time?" She looked at me as if I'd asked a stupid question. 7. Why? Just asking. You're going, right? You invited me? Silence. She frowned. Of course we did. Why wouldn't I invite you? I don't know. You hadn't mentioned it. She rolled her eyes. I'm mentioning it now. And that's it. End of discussion. I was going to dinner. Not because anyone wanted me there, but because it would be strange if I didn't go. I was part of the scenery, the chair that can't be empty, the name that can't be missing from the reservation. But nobody cared whether I opened my mouth or not. On Saturday, we went out to dinner. The restaurant was modern, low lighting, tablet menu. My son-in-law ordered wine. My wife and daughter were chatting about who knows what. I was looking at the menu, trying to decide between chicken or fish, as if it mattered, as if anything I did there mattered. In the middle of dinner, my son-in-law blurted out, "We're thinking about moving." My wife almost dropped her glass. Seriously? Where to? Portland. My company opened an office there. They offered me a better position, higher salary, better quality of life. My daughter smiled, a little nervous. We're still deciding, but it's a good opportunity. I stopped eating. I looked at her. I waited. I waited for her to look back at me. I waited for her to ask what I thought. But she didn't ask. She just kept talking to her mother, talking about schools in Portland, about the weather, about how her grandson would love it. And right there, in that moment, I understood. They weren't excluding me out of malice. They didn't even realize they were doing it. Because for them, I was no longer relevant. I was the past, the guy who paid the bills, who held things together. But now they had their lives, and I was just the old man who showed up at dinners. I spent the whole night awake, staring at the ceiling, thinking about Portland, thinking that my daughter was moving to another state, taking my grandson, starting a new life, and nobody had thought it important to ask me how I felt about it. Nobody had stopped to think that maybe, just maybe, I wanted to be part of that decision, or at least be told before everyone else had already agreed. On Sunday morning, I waited for my wife to wake up. I waited for her to have coffee. I waited for the right moment, and I asked, "Did you know they were thinking of moving?" She looked at me over her cup. I knew. She told me last week. And you didn't think it was important to tell me? I was going to tell you. I just didn't have time. You didn't have time. Yeah, you know how it is. Everything gets rushed. I took a deep breath. They're moving to Portland, taking our grandson away. And you didn't have time to tell me. She sighed. That sigh of someone dealing with a difficult person. They haven't decided yet. It's just a possibility. But everyone's already in favor. Everything's already on track. Because it's a good opportunity. You should be happy for them. I am. But I wish I'd been consulted. Consulted about what? It's not our life. It's their life. But it's our family. And they're adults. They make their own decisions. I stayed quiet. Because she was right. And at the same time, she was completely wrong. Yes, they were adults. Yes, it was their life. But family doesn't work like that. Family is about belonging, about caring about what the other person feels. And at some point, my family decided that what I felt didn't matter anymore. I started noticing other things, small things, details that on their own meant nothing. But together, they formed a clear picture. My wife had a whole life that I wasn't a part of. She had lunch with her friends every week. She went to the gym. She took Pilates classes. She had WhatsApp groups where they laughed at jokes I would never understand. And that was fine. She had the right to have her own life. But when did her life stop including us? I tried to remember the last time we did something together. Just the two of us. Nothing obligatory. Nothing like a family dinner or a social engagement. And I couldn't. Not because my memory was bad, but because it hadn't happened. We lived in the same house. We slept in the same bed. But we didn't live the same life. One day I got home from work and she wasn't there. She left a note on the fridge. I went to dinner with Carol. There's lasagna in the oven. I heated up the lasagna. I sat at the table, alone. I ate while looking at my phone. And I realized that this had become a routine. She would go out, I would stay. And neither of us thought it was strange. I called my daughter, just to talk. She answered on speakerphone. She was driving. I asked how she was. She said she was fine. Busy, but fine. I asked about her grandson. She said he was great, growing fast, learning to swim. I said, "That's great." Silence. I tried to start a conversation. I asked about work. She answered with monosyllables. I asked about the new car. She said she was still looking at it, and suddenly she said, "Dad, sorry, I'm arriving at the market. We'll talk later, okay?" And hung up. We didn't talk after that, because we never talked. I was the guy she called when she needed money, when she needed a favor, when she needed someone to pick up her grandson from school because she and her husband had meetings at the same time. But to talk, to share her life with me, I wasn't good enough for that. For that, she had her mother. It was on a Thursday that everything finally fell apart. I was in the office, finishing some reports when my cell phone rang. Unknown number. I answered. It was a lawyer, polite, formal. He said he needed to confirm my consent to the sale of a property in Monterey. I froze. What sale? The house registered in your name. Your wife contacted us last week to start the process. We just need your signature to finalize it. Wait, my wife sold the house without telling me? Sir, we presume you were aware. She gave us all the documentation. I hung up. I sat there, staring at the wall. My wife had sold the house. She'd gone to a lawyer. She'd signed papers. She'd found a buyer, and she hadn't thought it necessary to tell me. It wasn't forgetfulness. It wasn't lack of time. It was a decision. She decided that it wasn't my responsibility, that I didn't need to know, that my authorization was just a formality. I arrived home 2 hours later. She was in the kitchen, preparing dinner. I heard her humming. She was happy, calm, guilt-free, weightless. And I exploded. I didn't yell, I didn't bang on the table. But I spoke. I spoke in a way I'd never spoken before. You sold the house. She stopped, turned around. Who told you? The lawyer. He called to confirm my signature. She sighed. I was going to tell you. When? After signing everything? After handing over the keys? You're exaggerating. Exaggerating? You sold a property that's in my name without telling me. It's in our names. It's a community marriage. That's not the point. She crossed her arms. So what's the point? The point is that you don't include me in anything. You make decisions about our lives, about our family, about our things, and I'm always the last to know. Because you never cared. Every time I tried to talk, you were tired. You were working, you were busy. When did you try to talk about selling the beach house? Silence. That's what I thought. She looked away. We don't use that house anymore. It's been empty for 2 years. It makes more sense to sell it. Makes sense for whom? For you? Because I wasn't consulted. I consulted our daughter. And me? You? She hesitated. You were going to agree anyway. How do you know? Did you ask? You didn't need to ask. I know you. And there, in that sentence, was everything. She knew me. She knew me so well that she knew I would swallow it, that I would accept it, that I would never do anything. And for years, she was right, but not anymore. I'm not going to sign. She blinked. What? You heard me. I'm not going to sign the sale. Are you serious? Completely. But we've already closed the deal. The buyer has already paid the deposit. That's your problem. You closed the deal. Without consulting me. You're being ridiculous. No, I'm being listened to, for the first time in years. She looked at me as if I were a stranger, and perhaps I was. Because the man she knew, the man who always said yes, who always made things easy, who always put everyone else before himself, that man was gone. The following days were a cold war. My wife barely spoke to me. When she did, it was to remind me that I was sabotaging the family and being selfish. My daughter called, angry. She said I was creating problems out of nothing, that the house was useless anyway, that I was being immature. And for the first time in my life, I said no to her. I'm not going to change my mind. Dad, the buyer will sue. Let them sue. The house is in my name. Nobody sells without my signature. She hung up on me. My wife started sleeping in the guest room. I stayed in our bed, alone. And it was strange, because I should have felt bad. I should have felt remorse. But I didn't. I was relieved. For the first time in years, I had said no. I had set a boundary, and the world hadn't ended. Of course, it had consequences. My daughter stopped calling. My son-in-law stopped greeting me at dinners. My grandson asked his mother why Grandpa was angry. And my wife? My wife started treating me like a tenant. We shared the house, but not our lives. One night, I was in the living room watching a game when she walked by. She stopped. She looked at me. How long are you going to keep up? This charade? What charade? This tantrum. This senseless rebellion. It's not rebellion. It's a boundary. A boundary? You never needed a boundary before. Because before I thought being invisible was the price of love. But it's not. And I'm not going to pay it anymore. She rolled her eyes. You're not invisible. You're dramatic. Then tell me, when was the last time you asked me what I thought about something? When was the last time my opinion changed a decision in this family? She opened her mouth, closed it, thought, and didn't answer. Because she had no answer. She knew. She just didn't want to admit it. I always thought you needed me, I said, but you don't. You need my money, my availability, my compliance. But me? My voice? My feelings? That never mattered. That's not true. Then why did you sell the house without telling me? Silence. That's what I thought. She left the room, and I stayed there, alone. But for the first time, I didn't feel lonely. Because loneliness isn't being alone. Loneliness is being surrounded by people and still not being seen. And I had spent years in that kind of loneliness. But now I preferred the silence of the empty room to the noise of a family pretending I mattered. At work, I continued as normal, professional, productive. Nobody knew about the chaos that was my home. Nobody needed to know. But one afternoon, one of my colleagues invited me for a beer after work. We went to a bar near the office. We talked about work, sports, nonsense. And in the middle of the conversation, he said, "You seem lighter." I frowned. "What do you mean?" "I don't know. You seem different, less tense," I thought. And I realized he was right. I was lighter. Because for the first time, I wasn't carrying the weight of being ignored. After 3 weeks, the buyer backed out of the house. My wife was furious. She said I'd ruined everything, that we'd missed a good deal, that I was stubborn, childish, impossible. I listened. I didn't respond, because I had nothing to say. She was right about one thing. I'd ruined her plan. But for the first time, I didn't care. The interesting thing is that after that, things started to change. Not in the way I expected. There was no apology. There was no deep conversation. But my wife started consulting me. Little things. "Do you want chicken or beef for dinner? Will you be home Saturday afternoon? What do you think about changing the sofa?" Nothing profound, nothing significant. But it was something. It was recognition that I existed. My daughter took longer. She went almost a month without speaking to me. Until one day she showed up at home without warning. My wife wasn't there. I opened the door. She was serious. "Can I come in?" I let her in. We sat in the living room. Silence. She looked at the floor. I waited. "Daddy called me," she said. I frowned. "My father died 10 years ago." "I know, but I dreamt about him, and he told me something." "What?" "That I'm turning into my mother." She looked at me. Her eyes welled up with tears. "You were always so easy, so available, never complained, never said no. And I guess I got used to it. I thought you didn't care, that you were fine being invisible?" She swallowed hard. "Yeah, invisible." "I wasn't feeling well," I said. "But I pretended so well that you believed me, and I don't blame you. I blame myself for not speaking up sooner." "I'm so sorry, Dad." "Me too." We stayed there, in silence, and it was strange, because we didn't hug. There wasn't an emotional scene, but there was truth, and sometimes truth is enough. She left half an hour later. She didn't promise anything. She didn't say she was going to change, but I saw it in her eyes. She understood, maybe not completely, but she understood. My wife and I started therapy. It was her idea. At first, I resisted. "Therapy won't change the past, but it can change the future," she said. And she was right. The therapist was direct. No beating around the bush. She asked questions that neither of us wanted to answer. And little by little, we started talking. Really. Not to win an argument, but to understand. My wife admitted that she had stopped seeing me as a partner, that she had started seeing me as a function. "You always said yes. You always made things easy, and I think I got used to it. I stopped asking because I knew the answer. But you never asked if I wanted to give that answer," I said. She nodded. "You're right. It wasn't magic. There was no overnight transformation, but there was a beginning. And after years of stagnation, a beginning was already a lot." 3 months later, my daughter announced she wasn't moving to Portland, at least not yet. We decided to wait another year, see how things unfold. My wife asked if it was because of her grandson's school. My daughter looked at me. It was because of Grandpa. My grandson was beside her. He looked at me and smiled. "I don't want to be away from you, Grandpa." And there, in that moment, I realized. It wasn't just the decisions. It was the example. My grandson had seen his grandfather disappear. He had felt the absence. and he had told his mother that he didn't want to leave. He was 4 years old, but he already knew what had taken me decades to learn. Presence matters, voice matters, and when you disappear, you leave a void. The beach house is still with me. I haven't sold it. I'm not going to sell it. I renovated it. I painted it. I changed the furniture. And now, once a month, I go there, alone. I spend the weekend. I read. I walk on the beach. I cook for myself. And it's good. It's good to have a place that's mine, where nobody decides anything without asking me, where my voice is the only one that matters. My wife started asking me if she could come along. Sometimes I let her. Sometimes I say I want to be alone, and she accepts it, because she learned, the hard way, that I also have desires, limits, that, I'm not just the guy who finances other people's dreams. My daughter calls me now, not every week, but she calls, and it's not just to talk to her mother, it's to talk to me. She asks how I am, what I've been doing, if I'm okay. And I answer, honestly, not with an automatic, I'm great, but with the truth. I'm tired. I'm thinking about taking a few days off. I'm processing some things. And she listens, because finally she understood that I also have processes to go through. At work, I asked to reduce my workload, not because I can't handle it, but because I want time. Time for myself, to do things I enjoy, to live, not just exist. My boss agreed and I started leaving earlier, not taking work home, and not always being available. It was strange at first. I felt guilty, like I was being selfish. But then I remembered. I spent decades putting everyone else first. And where did that get me? To being treated like furniture. So no, it's not selfishness, it's survival. One afternoon, I was at the beach house, sitting on the deck, watching the sea, and my cell phone rang. My daughter. I answered. Hi, Dad. Hi, daughter. Where are you? At the beach. Oh, can I come over? I thought. Not today, daughter. Today I want to be alone. Silence. I waited for her to react badly. I waited for her to get upset. But she only said, okay, Dad, we'll talk later. And hung up. And that was the victory. Not because I said no, but because she accepted it. Without drama. Without guilt. She understood. And that meant we were starting to fix what had broken. I'm not going to pretend everything's resolved. Because it's not. There are still days when my wife forgets to consult me. There are still times when my daughter assumes I'll agree to anything. But the difference is that now, when that happens, I speak up. I don't swallow it. I don't pretend everything's okay. I say, did you consult me about this? And most of the time, the answer is no. And they apologize. And we start over. I discovered that boundaries aren't punishment. They're protection. I spent so much time thinking that saying no was cruelty, that it was disappointing, that it was failing, but it's not. It's teaching people to respect me. And the people who truly love me, they learn. It hurts. It's uncomfortable. But they learn. My son-in-law and I started having a better relationship. He apologized. He said he never realized he was excluding me. That to him, I was the easygoing father-in-law. And he thought easygoing meant I didn't care. But I do care, I said. I always have. I just didn't know how to say it. He nodded. I understand. And I'll do things differently. And he has done so. Now when they make big decisions, he calls me. He asks me. And sometimes I agree. Sometimes I disagree. But the important thing is that I am consulted, that my voice is heard. My grandson asked me the other day, Grandpa, why don't you come every week anymore? I thought. How do You explained to a 4-year-old that Grandpa needed to learn not to be a doormat? Because Grandpa is learning to take care of himself, but I'll always be here when you need me. He thought for a moment and said, My mom said you were sad. I was. Are you still? Sometimes. But I'm better. And I am. Better doesn't mean cured. It means I stopped betraying myself. I stopped accepting crumbs and calling it love. I stopped being convenient and demanding to be important. My therapist asked me in a session, Do you think your family loves you? I thought about it. I think they love the version of me that always said yes. But the real version, the one with boundaries, they're still learning how to love. And is that enough for you? It has to be, because I'm not going to pretend anymore. My wife and I still sleep in separate rooms sometimes, not out of anger, but because I've discovered that I sleep better alone. And she understood. It's not about you, I said. It's about me, about having space, about not having to share everything. She nodded. I understand. And the interesting thing is that our relationship has improved. Not because we're together all the time, but because when we are, it's by choice. Not out of obligation, not out of habit, but because we want to be there. I don't know if we'll be together forever. I don't know if my daughter will really change. I don't know if my grandson will grow up seeing me as more than just the old man who gives presents. But I know one thing. I'm not going to disappear again. I'm not going to accept being forgotten anymore. And if that means losing people, then so be it. Because I've already lost myself. And I'm not going to let that happen again. Today is Sunday. I'm at the beach house, alone. The sea is calm. The sky is clear. I made coffee. I sat on the deck. And I'm okay. Not happy in the way people expect. Not jumping for joy. But at peace. And peace, after years of silent chaos, is everything. My wife texted me this morning. Good morning. Enjoy your day. I replied, Thank you. You too. Simple, respectful, no pressure, no expectations. And that's fine. My daughter called yesterday. We talked for half an hour. She told me about work, about her grandson, about her plans for next month. And she asked me if I wanted to go to a barbecue at their house. Sure, I said. Confirm closer to the date. Okay, Dad. And she hung up. Without insisting. Without pressuring me. Because she understood that my presence isn't guaranteed. It's a choice. I learned that we teach people how to treat us. And I taught them wrong. I taught them that I was disposable. That I didn't matter. That they could decide everything without me. And it wasn't their fault. It was mine. Because I accepted it. Because I pretended everything was okay. Because I thought love was infinite sacrifice. But love isn't like that. Love is reciprocity. It's respect. It's seeing the other person. And I wasn't being seen. I was being used. And I let it happen. For years. Until one day I didn't let it happen anymore. And it was the best decision I ever made. I don't know how this story ends. Maybe my family and I will find a new balance. Maybe not. Maybe my wife and I will stay together. Maybe not. Maybe my daughter will continue to include me. Maybe she'll revert to her old habits. I don't know. And that's okay. Because I'm no longer waiting for their validation. I'm validating myself. I exist. My voice matters. My presence has value. And if someone doesn't see that, the problem isn't mine. It's theirs. So if you're listening to this, and you recognized yourself at some point in this story, let me tell you something. You're not being dramatic. You're not exaggerating. You're not being difficult. You're just tired of being invisible. And that's not weakness. It's awakening. And waking up hurts. Because you realize everything you've accepted, everything you've swallowed, everything you've ignored. but it also sets you free. Because for the first time, you stop living the life that others want you to, and you start living your own. I don't know what comes next, but I know I'm not going to disappear again. And that, for me, is enough. If this story resonated with you, if you felt every word in your heart, leave a like on this video. It's not about algorithms. It's about you telling me that I'm not alone in this, that you've also felt invisible, and that you're also learning to show up. Subscribe to the channel. Because I'm going to keep telling stories like this. Stories of people who woke up late, of people who set boundaries, of people who chose peace over an audience. And I want you to be a part of it. And there's a video playing on your screen right now. Click on it. Because if this story impacted you, the next one will transform you, and you don't want to miss it.